The first thing I want to kind of discuss is starting from nothing, an advantage or a disadvantage. So where this sort of comes from is, most innovations are built on top of what came before. And so they're always a bit kind of clunky. We've got that habit, anyone who's sort of worked in, with computers kind of knows this. We've got operating systems on top of operating systems on top of systems built by engineers that are all about kind of routing and turning things on and off. And often, our systems, as we sort of grow on top of each other, they turn into these Frankenstein systems, and they don't really work very well. But occasionally, when you're starting with nothing, you've almost got this amazing sort of advantage of having no legacy. So you can start from scratch with all the new things around you. An example of this is in 2011, the tsunami, the earthquake and tsunami that hit Japan, decimated their agriculture industry. And their agriculture industry was already heavily subsidised. It wasn't a huge industry, but it was a culturally important industry. And one of the really interesting products that I saw showcased at South by Southwest is this product, which is called a Kikaxi. So essentially, what Kikaxi is, it's a field to table social network. That's how I describe it. So this Kikaxi, this unit here, is a solar-powered module that picks up all these different kind of all these different bits of environmental information, such as the weather, such as the different elements to do with the soil. It's also got a camera in it, a time-lapse camera. So it's actually sort of showing crops and how they kind of grow. So how Kikaxi works is essentially it's a little bit like Kickstarter. If a farmer wants to plant a crop, what we all do is we all chip in money to kind of pay for the seeds and pay for the actual kind of harvesting of that, pay for the actual kind of growing and planting of that crop. And what we do is we sort of watch that crop grow live online, and we become a social network where we can kind of comment and kind of see how this thing is actually growing. And at the end of it, we either get a part of the actual money from the yield of the crop, or we get some of the physical crop ourselves, and we can make stuff with it. And then we can talk about, hey, let's make some turnip soup, and I've got a good recipe, and start talking about it, which is a really interesting sort of idea. That idea of us, like at the moment, we're really interested in where things come from and the authenticity of all the products we sort of consume. This seems like the sort of a logical kind of extension of that. I'll show you a video. I sort of spoke to the guy who, one of the guys who created it.
So Adam, can you explain to me what Kikaxi is? We're developing a farm-to-table social network platform that uses the smart farm monitoring device to better connect consumers with producers and the story behind their food. So basically the device itself will record data points such as day length, temperature, humidity, sensors to record soil vitals and wind gradient, and a time-lapse camera to record the growth, because oftentimes when you buy food at a farmer's market or at a grocery store, that sort of story behind production is lost in harvest. So we want to be able to sort of enter a new level of food transparency that is both empowering to the farmer as well as the consumer.
And it's solar powered?
Solar powered.
Fantastic. Yep. And it's some examples over there on the video as well. So these examples are so
right. This is a Kickstarter video that we've just launched.
So you kind of get that sort of notion of what's really interesting about an idea like that is it was kind of born out of the idea that because the agriculture industry was decimated, they needed a new way of actually kind of bringing it back up again. So that's become a really, really serious and needful problem in Japan. And it wasn't just this guy. There was a really interesting sort of area which was just Japanese innovators who were at South by Southwest, and that was a consistent kind of problem they were solving, was how can we kind of reinvigorate the local agriculture. And this is arguably my favourite idea. So this is a university student with his project.
Yeah, can you please explain? Okay, so you're printing a soil sensor.
Hello. I'm SenseCloud member, and this is our product for SenseCloud. This is a soil moisture sensor for agriculture. This sensor is very cheap because it's just made by paper like this. So this is normal paper, and this is normal home using jet printer. And you can print the electric circuit on this paper like this. So this is the electric circuit. Yeah. And you can use this for a sensor. So it's good. This kind of sensor is very cheap.
Yes, because you're saying it would only $200.
Yeah. So we think that our problem of the farmer is they can't buy enough many sensors because this kind of conventional sensor is very expensive, more than $200. So we want to make very cheap sensors and distribute to farmer. And farmer can control the irrigation more smart. So we want to make very cheap sensors.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I love the way it looks like a leaf.
It looks, it's amazing.
It's beautiful.
Absolutely, it is an amazing piece of gear. Well, what's probably missing from that explanation is the other remarkable innovation that's making this possible is conductive ink. So previously in Japan, I think it's actually more. I think it's actually commercially available in Japan at the moment. You can buy conductive ink. So you can buy ink that can essentially print circuit boards out of your crappy, annoying Canon inkjet printer you have at home that you rarely use and it gets you angry. So that's the first part of the innovation, I guess. And the second part is the fact that they've done this with it. So if you look this up, it's called the Scent Sprout. What it does is essentially, its main sort of purpose is to work out the amount of water a crop needs, which is an incredibly useful thing because some 80% of kind of water used in irrigation is wasteful. There's sort of an overuse of it. So this is a method to kind of work out where water would actually be more usefully kind of distributed around a crop. And as he's saying, this uses incredibly simple, off-the-shelf, go downstairs, buy it from Dick Smith componentry, and these printable kind of circuits, which whether you print 10 or whether you print 1,000, it's negligible. The cost is pretty much the same. It's cents. It's not hundreds of dollars. So suddenly he's created a system, a network kind of system, and some software that picks it up that allows for this kind of thing, for this monitoring of our kind of soil and our agriculture to be possible. And again, this is a university project, so it's not a commercially available product as yet, but incredibly inspiring that someone's kind of worked on that. And I guess what's interesting is, I guess it brings up the argument, is starting from nothing an advantage or a disadvantage? One of the things I've sort of found is, I think we live in an age right now where we're obsessed with ideas. Like, we just love ideas. Like, we can't get enough of them. We look them up, oh, that's clever, look at that. We're even saying this is really clever. But what we're lacking is really, really good questions. Like, and I think something like the tsunami happened, which is definitely kind of a horrible, horrible thing to happen. But it's really fascinating that has actually brought about this really, really desperate need. And it's almost like we don't actually act. Like, even things like we don't really actively kind of move into kind of action mode until the situation gets really dire. And they've had that situation. It's sort of born all this sort of new kind of creative thinking. Has anyone got